Since the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini on 16 September in Tehran, tens of thousands of women have taken over the streets in Iran chanting "Women, Life, Freedom." These protests are part of a long history of feminist resistance in Iran that began way back in 1979, a revolution that stunned the world. A fundamental characteristic of the present-day unrest-turned movement has been the participation of women. Iranian women are leading the charge, coming from all ages and backgrounds, demanding justice, reform, and their rights. With thousands of men joining in as well, the protests have spread from Tehran to several cities across Iran. The streets are filled with angry demonstrators crying, "Death to the dictator," and women are out burning their headscarves and cutting their hair in open defiance of the regime's strict control. The 1979 Iranian Revolution was about one idea: freedom. It was an idea that inspired thousands of women to oppose the Shah in an unprecedented resistance. It brought seismic changes to Iran. One area that has come under scrutiny is the way regimes control women, how they dress and wear their hair. The old Shah in the 1930s banned the veil and ordered police to forcibly remove headscarves. But in the early 1980s, the new Islamic authorities imposed a mandatory dress code that required all women to wear the hijab. The institution of clerical rule changed how Iranian women ruled their bodies and made choices. Before the revolution, the hijab was already widely worn, but many women also chose to don Western-style clothes, including jeans, mini skirts, and short-sleeved tops. While many women were already in higher education at the time of the revolution, the subsequent years saw a marked increase in the number attending university. This was in part because the authorities managed to convince conservative families living in rural areas to allow their daughters to study away from home. Hence, Tehran University saw a sudden rise in women students. During the 1970s revolution, the hijab became a sign of opposition to the monarchy. Many middle-class women started wearing the veil voluntarily as a form of protest. Let's rewind further. On January 8, 1936, Reza Shah Pahlavi issued a decree known as Kashf-e-Hijab or unveiling, which eliminated veils from Iranian society in a bid to modernize the country. Women had the choice of wearing the hijab, gained the right to vote in 1963, and generally challenged the patriarchal norms, limiting their advancement. They were active in all areas of life in Iran. The Family Protection Act increased the age of marriage for women, curtailed polygamy, restricted temporary marriages, and decreased the clergy's role. Under the Shah's rule, women began to engage in Iranian society, attending university, mingling with men, and donning Western-style clothes. The Shah was inspired by the westernization he saw during his visits to countries like Turkey. It was linked to women's rights and entitlement. But the Shah's ban on the hijab stoked the outrage of opponents in the religious establishment. Police were ordered to physically remove veils of women and sometimes even beat them for wearing them. The Shah was overthrown and exiled on September 16, 1941, ending the ban on the hijab. The 1979 Islamic Revolution swiftly undid the monarchy's nascent efforts to advance women's rights. Ayatollah Khomeini imposed laws that enshrined gender discrimination. Beaches and sports were segregated, married women were barred from attending regular school, and women could not become judges. All girls above a certain age had to wear head coverings. Marxism, nationalism, and liberalism all played important roles in the 1979 revolution. Yet it was later branded Islamic with such insistence that this eventually became its sole adjective. The ruling clergy coupled the term Islamic with the revolution, calling it a regime of truth. More importantly, they impeded the emergence of a non-religious alternative to their peculiar political system. Over the past 39 years, no secular political group has been able to mount a formidable challenge to the Islamic Republic. Instead, other religious forces have challenged the ruling clergy. They have done so both at the level of practical politics and by way of introducing viable alternatives to the ideal of the Islamic State. The impetus for Iran's most significant periods of political unrest in recent decades can be traced back to the Islamic reformists. Examples include the reformist movement from 1997 until 2005 and the Green movement, which emerged after the disputed 2009 elections. The Green movement brought the regime to the brink of collapse, and its religious ties were undeniable. Its leaders, Mir Hossein Mousavi and Mehdi Karoubi, who are still under house arrest, are both religious figures who have always aligned with the Islamists. After claiming a dominant post-revolution position, the clergy under then Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khomeini exploited their irreproachable reputation and religious bond with the masses to eliminate their rivals and consolidate their power. They converted Iran's religious networks into permanent political platforms. Mosques and other religious spaces and occasions were at the forefront of their propaganda machinery. Mosques were also and are still used as polling stations during elections. Iran's ruling clergy argue that the divine right to political leadership rests not only with the Prophet Muhammad and Shiite imams, but also with Islamic jurists in today's world. According to Khomeini, and I'm quoting him here, God has conferred upon the government in the present age the same powers and authority that were held by the most noble messenger and the imams, with respect to equipping and mobilizing armies, appointing governors and officials, and levying taxes, expending them for the welfare of the Muslims. Now, however, it is no longer a question of a particular person government devolves instead upon one who possesses the qualities of knowledge and justice, unquote. This assertion could be questioned on multiple levels. First and foremost, it offers a problematic reading of Islamic history. It ignores the reality that the Prophet Muhammad's governance was a historical occurrence as opposed to a part of his divine mission. In the same vein, many Iranian religious reformists repudiate the divine source of political authority, not only in the present but also for the Prophet and Imams. In all this, while these revolutionary women did not forget their struggle, the issue of women's rights was deemed to be an afterthought under the Khomeini regime, and thus no immediate steps were taken by them to address their concerns. Instead, as was feared, women gradually lost their rights as strict control over their bodies was legislated. Women found themselves pushed out of the public sphere, losing all advancements made under the Shah's regime. More importantly, the family protection law was repealed and the hijab was made obligatory. Even as their freedom was systematically curtailed, women did not quietly accept the restrictions. Instead, they were forced into submission through the use of violence, making it difficult for them to participate in society in any capacity. In the 1990s, female activists focused on restoring some of their lost rights under family laws and succeeded in regaining the right to initiate divorce and obtain child custody. Throughout this period, many women committed daring acts of disobedience to highlight the conditions they lived under. Control over a woman's body has long had political overtones in Iran. There are several dimensions to the unrest gripping Iran at the moment. What started as a fight for justice since Mahsa's death has merged into a much wider movement against the current clerical regime, with the post-revolutionary generation rejecting the current system. with the whale being a visible symbol of the Islamic Republic's control over the population. The current protests are a direct attack against the Islamic regime's characterization of Iran's identity at home and in the world. The administration, especially the Guardian Council, is unlikely to give in to allow any major change in their position on women, as conceding their power on this issue opens them up to further attacks on their legitimacy and ability to retain power in Iran. Depending on which side outlasts the other and what state the country finds itself in at the end of this battle, the implications for the women's movement will be massive. Either the laws governing women will be further tightened or Iran will enter an era of reforms. Neither scenario is likely to occur without a period of political uncertainty. It is undisputed that the current crisis gripping the country is a manifestation of a deep dissatisfaction. The question now Iran faces is an existential one: whether the regime is willing to change or risk being overthrown.